It's been a minute, but I'm back to talk about DayZ, and it's a special occasion. I'm about to talk about something I'm very passionate about. So I'm breaking out a vintage bottle, okay, out of a Hungry Jack's glass. Cheers. Now that's fucking good. You subscribed on the last one, which means I could afford Pepsi this time. Thank you very much. So as I said, I've been wanting to make this video for a very long time. I want to talk about DayZ's Gunplay. Okay, this is my clickbait. The sway is too high, but it's actually more than that. It's that the systems around Gunplay are far too simple. And it's made even cheaper by another system, a parallel system in the game that isn't necessarily guns themselves. It's something else. There's ways to give feedback, how something works, how you wish it would work. The other part of the feedback, which is how it feels. And in a lot of ways, that can be a lot more helpful for a developer or a designer. Does that make sense? So like, if I feel that I don't have good control over my gun unless I'm holding my breath, and that's the only time I feel like I have control over my gun, that's how the game makes me feel. Okay? So how do the developers work around that? And that's where how things work can be discussed. I think the way you control your gun is incredibly arcadey in that there's not a lot of depth. As you can see in this video, showing how the current sway system works since the new engine. It uses X and Y sine waves, and the X axis has noise applied to it. There is the rate at which, or the speed at which it sways, and there is the amplitude, which is like how high and low it actually goes during those peaks. So you can see here in this video. In the current system, carrying more weight does not increase the amplitude, it just increases the speed and the noise. As you can see here, I have full stamina and the SVD is swaying away, it's doing its thing. It's going all the way down and now back up. And now if I have zero stamina, we see the gun is swaying more erratically and faster. But if we actually compare these two sways, the distance between the highest point and the lowest point is the same. So when you have no stamina, your sway is moving at about 3.5 times faster than when you're full stamina. That's how the current system works. Different attachments do change things like recoil and sway, but they don't do it in a drastic way that anyone really cares. Let's compare different M4 builds. Here we have a basic one. We have one with both MP handguard and buttstock, and this one with the rail handguard and QCB buttstock. The video footage here is sped up 4 times. The QCB buttstock sways more erratically and faster, and the MP one is the most steady, but there's not that big of a difference, and that's even shown here with the recoil test, with pretty boring results. No one's really picking a different stock over another, because of how it affects the handling of the weapon, like they might have in old DayZ, like they do in other games like Tarkov. It's like a really simple, boring system. Why does this matter? Why does it matter if the guns are, the sway is too simple and you can just hold breath? I think it makes gunfights in general pretty boring, that it comes down to who can stop, raise their gun, and hold breath the fastest. From a full sprint, any player, as long as they have some stamina, can immediately make their gun pinpoint accurate and take a shot from sprint. And beyond that, the weapon handling itself is pretty simple. You aim the gun, it comes up, and then there's a crosshair. And the crosshair currently is static. In the alpha of DayZ, there was a floating crosshair that showed you a general region where your bullets might land. If there was an obstruction between the center of the screen and the barrel of the gun, it would move the floating crosshair onto the obstruction. Games that currently have a 3D crosshair in them include Helldivers 2 and Arc Raiders. Can't ever say that like, hey, we can't overload the gamers, we can't overload those console gamers with a 3D floating crosshair, because Fortnite has one.
Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Every day I'm shuffling.
Rust doesn't have a crosshair, Tarkov doesn't have a crosshair, DayZ doesn't need a crosshair, right? A lot of servers have the crosshair disabled. I know you can always turn on an on-screen crosshair overlay with third-party programs or even in your monitor. Unlinking the barrel of the gun from the camera, I'm going to explain a bit more about that in a second, it would actually work, because then even if you have an overlay crosshair that shows you the center of the screen, that's not necessarily where the gun's aiming, right? So the way it currently works is when you aim down sight, you basically become a GoPro on the stock of that gun. Like, you are tied to that gun, and wherever the gun moves, you move with it. You are lock steady with it at all times, but that's not how people work, right? We are like multiple points of contact and multiple pivots to try and line this thing up. And that's what makes like gun shooting interesting, right? How different ergonomics affect how you hold and use this weapon. And right now in DayZ, it doesn't matter, because you're lock steady with the gun at pretty much all times. There's a slight kick when you turn, there's a very light tilt, but there's no inertia. You are attached to the gun and there's no inertia in that aiming. That's weird. You hold right click, you press shift, it scopes. You let go of right click, it unscopes. You tap right click, you ADS, and it stays up. And then you press shift or middle mouse, and then you're permanently weapon raised until you hold right click and release it again. Inertia is the idea that a heavier weapon or a more cumbersome weapon is harder to get onto the target faster. In the old engine, when you turned your gun, certain guns, they would drag behind the crosshair a little bit. So by adding weapon inertia to larger weapons, you actually increase the capabilities of shorter, lighter weapons in close quarters. It's not just, this gun hits the hardest, I want to use it. It's actually, this gun doesn't hit as hard, but I can turn on a dime and put 25 bullets on someone on target, whereas if I use this gun, I'm going to struggle to control that close quarters. Someone rushes my building and I need to whip 90 degrees across the room. Which one of these guns am I going to trust more? I'm going to trust the MP5 to stay on target and track that target more than I would an AKM with a drum mag. Maybe inertia could only apply to hipfire. So trying to hipfire in SVD is way harder, but if you aim down sight with the SVD, which lowers your field of view and makes it harder to react to fast moving targets, then you have full control of the SVD. Fuck. I care so much about this, and I've been harping on about it for years, and I just need to sit down and make one long video about why these things matter for the gunplay. And I keep overthinking it. So I talked then about separating the gun aim from the camera. So you can have inertia, you can have sway, you can have recoil that's separate from how the camera of your character's eyes are experiencing it. It's not the same as it was in the old engine, where it felt like the gun was an object you were holding. Whereas right now it feels like you become the gun when you ADS. That's how it feels. I think separating those things again makes the game feel a lot more immersive and feels like I'm actually firing a weapon, which is actually how Armor Reforger does it. When you aim down sights with a gun in Armor Reforger, the gun sways, you don't. That said, I don't think everything's perfect with the Armor Reforger system. In particular, they don't have like a weapon inertia. It feels a little plastic, it feels light, because the way it turns and moves in your arms feels like it has no weight. And that's something that can be adjusted with animations, but they have added inertia to DayZ in the form of movement sprinting inertia, which gets higher as you put more weight on your character. And I'm glad they added those systems, like they added a bit more weight to the character movement. So I don't think it's a bad thing if they added a little bit to some of the heavier, bigger weapons in DayZ. There is very little movement inaccuracy, meaning that there's no real punishment for strafing and running around while shooting. Whereas if we look at this footage from 0.62, moving makes your gun incredibly inaccurate. I prefer if movement inaccuracy is workable in close quarters, but long distance you need to be still. Another thing that gets on my nerves is the cold shiver. That was nice of the rain to appear and just make us wet.
Thanks, guys.
Might just wring my shit out real quick. I don't think the shaking should be constant. I think it should be like a sneeze, where like it comes and goes. Sometimes you shiver. It barely matters, but it's annoying.
Oh, it started raining again.
Can't make this up, fucking hell. DayZ.
Yeah.
I want a Picatinny grip, like the one that's on the MP5, that I can take off that thing, put on the M4 rail handguard. And now my M4 has really good recoil control, like vertical recoil control. Laser sights, how they could be used if you don't add a floating crosshair, add laser sights to the game, all of a sudden, that just makes sense. The AS Val has an AK to Picatinny scope mount that I wish you could take off and put on other weapons. I think also weapons that are inside your inventory should equip much slower than ones that are holstered or ones that are put on your back. Reloading mags from pouches on your vest was faster than reloading them from your backpack. Having people make choices about how their weapons are stowed on their person. I think scopes currently visually look bad. I think they're a bit blurry because they're using a mask lensing effect. They're not doing picture in picture. They're not re-rendering things bigger. What they're doing is they're taking the rendered bit here and they're bulging it out a little bit. In these example images, I've actually removed the lensing effect from these scopes. I understand this isn't that important of a feature, but I just prefer the cleaner look through scopes. I don't like that blurry look. I think the visuals through scopes are bad. There's really bad Z fighting beyond like 600 meters where you see walls and roads and players' items flickering. I wish the attachments did more stuff, and really all that matters at the end of the day, if you just want a power ranking of guns, is which one does more damage. Which one can one-shot kill or two-shot kill? Having a sip. I want bipods. I want weapon resting. Imagine if the built-in bipod on the Scout worked. Oh, so Armor Reforger has a weapon resting system. Solid object here, it does a little check. Is there a weapon so we can rest the weapon on? It snaps it on.
Damn, how good would it be if you could just rest your weapons on the fucking windowsill? Fuck.
Can the rooster shut the fuck up, dude? As you can see in that clip, I have found an overview position. I have rested my character, and there's a window in front of me that I can't rest my weapon on. And because I have to stand up from that position to see him, I have to deal with a horrible sway, which means I have to hold my breath constantly, off and on and off and on and off and on to stay on target, because if not, my sway goes up and down, up and down. In this clip, I have over half stamina. I'm not that heavily geared. I'm not carrying heavy equipment. I'm not carrying a car battery. I'm not carrying thousands of rounds, and yet my gun's flying all over the place, and it gets hard, so I have to use the hold breath all the time. It's not a realistic mechanic, and it's not a fun mechanic in the way that it makes the gunplay without hold breath feel yucky. So let's talk about it. Stamina. You're so reliant on that control key. If you have the chance to hold breath, why wouldn't you? If there's a button that makes your gun perfectly accurate, why wouldn't you press it? Whether or not you're wearing a plate carrier and carrying a truck battery, or you've just spawned in, your guns are just as accurate as one another's. That's so fucking frustrating. It doesn't have depth. So what are we gonna do about it? What do I want to do about it? There's a few different solutions.
Halving the sway across the board and just removing hold breath would just make the game better.
Yeah.
The hold breath is just too good. Just remove that fucking ability to do that. Who cares? And then just like make it so whatever weight you're carrying increases your sway. So you pack light, you have less sway.
That's one choice. And in fact, in 0.62, the last version of the old engine, there was no hold breath. Stamina was different back then. You could infinitely run. But as you ran, you accumulated fatigue. Fully rested, guns were pretty accurate. There was a little sway, but things were pretty accurate. Sprint around for 30 seconds, and the gun would get twice to 3 times the sway. Sprinted around for 2+ minutes, and aiming down sight is like it is now, at all times, just standing up. What this means is, if you had a good position and you rested, you could take a target accurately. And if you got shot at when you were on the move, your first response wasn't to immediately look the direction the gunshot came from, press control, and be on target. It was to seek shelter, then rest, then get on target. Spotted! Ow! I've been hit! But that's a choice, right? You make a choice when you move out of cover. You make a choice when you move into open areas where there might be snipers. Coming down towards Starry, and you see players coming along the road from Novi to Starry. So you sprint to a bush, you lay down, you gather yourself. When you fire upon them, they are in the open, they are vulnerable, but you have taken that advantage by resting. So if they try and return fire, they're going to be fighting their sway, but you have made a smart choice in your positioning and your timing and how you chose to engage, and that made it so interesting. Friend of mine, DeOne, fantastic modder, hosted a 0.62 server, and we hosted an event called Return to 0.62. We filled up the server and we went to Northwest Airfield and PvP'd, and it was exactly how I remember it.
I wholeheartedly believe that the devs could re-implement old gunplay mechanics, some of them at least. It would be fun.
Makes PvP last longer too, which is kind of fun.
Is that a person down the airfield? Second to the last south hangar.
Huge.
I think it's a person. I'm gonna take a shot.
You've really angered the horde.
Yeah, but I think I hit the man. The gunplay felt intense and immersive, and I felt in control of my gun. So the thing I said at the start about how I think the current gunplay system is both simpler and I feel less in control of my gun is true. It doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter how much you're carrying. It doesn't matter how much you move. You will never be more accurate unless you hold your breath. And that's really boring. So as I've talked about, you could halve the sway and remove hold breath. I think that's a stopgap solution. I think If you were going to do that, you would also want to implement a secondary hidden stamina system, which is just fatigue. Using your stamina, sprint, moving around, jumping, whatever, and that builds up fatigue until you take things slower and steadier, rest, you stop to eat, you cook some food. Those things turn your fatigue down so that someone that has moved around a lot has higher sway, as high as we have right now, but someone who's been sitting still, they can naturally see their gun kind of come to a more accurate sway. So it's a second hidden stamina system. The other option is you could have 2 stamina bars, sequential stamina bars, where you use the shorter one for gunplay first, then you use the one that's just purely for movement, and you have to wait for the entire thing to regenerate back past the movement one into the breath one before you can then hold your breath, before you regain full accuracy on your gun. And that being the difference there is that once you've used that first stamina bar, that's when you get the big sway. These are ideas of a system. I don't know, like halving the accuracy of hold breath, reducing the reliance on it would be huge. I don't know. There's a lot of things there where prone isn't fun. Crouching is better. Crouching is good right now. I think the way crouching reduces your sway right now is pretty good. But it's the fact that like going from full sprint into crouching makes your gun just as accurate as if you had been crouched the entire time. That's really weird. I just want the gunplay to feel more interesting. I don't know how many times I can say it. I just want the gunplay to have more depth. And for players, like even if you're a casual player, right? And you've sat through this rant and you're saying, I don't like the idea of it being more complicated. I don't think this game needs to be Tarkov, right? And I understand that. Tarkov's fucking overwhelming. Tarkov's nonsense to me. But it's also proven that a large audience of gamers are happy to play a game with such a complex weapon handling system and still give it a fair crack. It not turn them away. And you know, DayZ does have depth. It has weapon jamming. The gunplay has become, especially with the leaning and shit, very arcadey, and it could have so much room for depth without it becoming too overwhelming. You pick up an MP5, you go to Northwest, you run into a building, and a fully geared guy runs in, and you have an MP5, you have a better chance of being on target than if they had a long rifle. And that's interesting to me. That's gameplay, baby. That's an interesting dynamic based on the choices and the paths that the characters have taken that have led to that situation, that there's a difference in how each player's guns control in that situation, and that even though one player might technically have a stronger weapon, the other one had the better tool for the job. Fuck! I know many servers run infinite stamina, infinite sprint, and that's seen as DayZ anti-hardcore. I think you should be able to sprint once you run out of stamina. Regens really slowly, so you have to stop and rest and have it use increased energy and water so that you can have a choice. Just keep sprinting despite not having stamina. But the adverse effect is that you're going to use your energy, you're going to use your hydration, and it's going to affect your stamina regeneration if you were to have to hold your breath, which makes the game more fun for the folks that like infinite stamina. They like infinite sprint. They don't like stopping and starting. I also think the stopping and starting is kind of dumb. The stamina bar is not long enough for it to feel good because you sprint for like 20 seconds and then you jog for 20 seconds and then you sprint for 20 seconds and you jog for 20 seconds. So it'd make the game more enjoyable for the people that want to keep sprinting. They just want to hold shift. But it has the adverse effect. Like, it has a downside. If you want to move slower as a player and just jog everywhere, you will be better off in long term. It's kind of a tortoise and a hare situation. I don't know. These are the things that have been going through my brain, and I really hoped for more with the gunplay update. They keep adding more depth to DayZ, and I love that DayZ continues to get such great support. That it's in the best state it's ever been, and yet I know it could be even better. This is my favorite game of all time, and I see its greatest features and its biggest flaws, and all I want is to keep giving ideas and talking about ways that it could be improved and be the best version of itself. And that's what I'm doing here. That's why I talk about these things. But if you're a server owner and you would like to experiment with some of these things, look into Legacy Gunplay from Jad. Hasn't been updated in a while. You might want to like make a custom config of it, adjust values for different scopes, weapons, whatnot. And S Gunplay by Simon Vick. I'm going to stop ranting now. I'm going to go edit this video. If you liked it, make sure you subscribe. I think there is memberships now on the channel. So if you would like to support me in getting Pepsi Max and not being homeless, that would be fantastic. I'd really appreciate that. And I'm going to try and pump out a lot of videos before Christmas. Have a glass of Pepsi Max for me. Pepsi Mix. Should put Pepsi Mix in the game, not just regular Pepsi. You can go now, by the way. Bye. Bye-bye. Bye.